that you have to make sure you got the right address, and you have the, what I used to do is actually drive by and take a photograph of the address, and it shows what they have, the cameras, it has the markings, the distinctive markings where you're not hitting the wrong place.
Okay. I want to talk about some of the pros and cons as it pertains to how the public feels in reference to no-knock warrants. What are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? You know, obviously the pros will lean heavily on the law enforcement side, and I'm sure some of the cons would lean towards the public side. So what are some of the pros and cons that you can articulate for our listening audience?
Some of the pros, or I'll start the pros first. Some of the pros is that you'll be able to take people into custody without violence, without anybody getting injured on the police side and the offender side. Also, you got the element of surprise. You can usually catch them off guard if they don't have surveillance equipment. Another thing is generally you can have somebody say that you know where the bathroom is located, and have the pipes. You can have somebody to knock the pipes off. That way they can't, if they flush it, it's going straight on the ground. And some of those high elevated locations. Another thing you can do is have them cause a distraction by throwing chains or busting the window of the bathroom and spraying the OC spray in there. That way, that's a deterrent. The cons would be you may have people in there other than the subject of the investigation. He may have children. He may have a girlfriends, other family member. May have maybe living with his parents or grandmother. That can cause a big problem. Another thing is that they may move. Usually especially in the narcotics activity, they're very transient. They may be, they may skip around and may live with actually a home address may be the place that they lay their head, but they're doing their drug activity someplace else.
Yeah. Another thing is, it allows the officer to stop the possible offender or the subject of the search warrant from destroying any evidence. A lot of times, that's their first reaction is to try to destroy or dispose of any evidence. And another thing is it gives them an opportunity to arm themselves and then, assault the officers. So those are some of the drawbacks as to, some of the pros to having a no-knock search warrant.
It's basically evidence is sensitive and it can be destroyed, or there's some kind of safety issue if you don't make a quick or dynamic entry. I think that's what they call it. Isn't that what they call it? Smoke dynamic entry.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the few that I've done, it was all drug related. So we pretty much had to get in and prevent any kind of destroying of evidence and that kind of thing. So I mean, those are dangerous. The potential for trouble is high, but the mistakes, I call them mistakes. I don't know if they really are mistakes. The mistakes made in the Breonna Taylor situation, when you do a search warrant of any kind, really, those shouldn't be. Like you shouldn't end up at the wrong house when you serve a search warrant. Like I don't even understand how that's possible.
Well, a lot of times, I know from personal experience, having been around people that have obtained search warrants, they rely on their informants too much. I used to use informants to as a roadmap to show me, okay, this is what I need to start looking at and to verify the information that they give me. A lot of times they take informant information as the gospel truth because they've given them valid information before. But informants are, I never wholly trusted an informant because they play, a lot of times they play both sides. They'll tell you that, hey, this person's doing this, that, and other. Then they go back and tell the offender, hey, I got information that the police, they own to you, and they gonna, do woo, woo, woo. And then before you know it, you got Clash of the Titans.
I mean, I understand trusting them to get where you're trying to go, to get what you're trying to get, but I just can't understand how, if I'm getting ready to serve a search warrant, I got to swear and affirm. Then the stuff like you said, I'm gonna have a picture. I'm gonna have the property appraiser's information in my affidavit when I get ready to go serve the search, get the search warrant from a judge, because I'm swearing affirming, one, that all the stuff that I'm telling you is true and correct, and that I know that this is the physical address. So how do they even see? That's shoddy. If you're getting search warrants off of informant stuff, that's shoddy, man.
Well, I got an experience that kind of mirrors of what they did or how they did it, but we had a different outcome. In the Breonna Taylor incident, I believe the suspect they was actually looking for, the offender, he was having packages supposedly delivered to that address, and which is common. They'll have UPS or FedEx or whatever to send the packages there, because people don't realize how easy it is to get drugs through the mail, through the UPS, and FedEx. So they know they have somebody else to sign for it. That takes them out the loop. That person holds onto the package. The person comes by later on, pick it up, and they break them off the money, and that's it. In my situation, what we did, we got information from one of those services, and I actually posed as a delivery person. And I delivered the package and got the signature, gave a takedown word, and they came down and rushed it in there. The offender was not there at the residence, which is the same thing in the Breonna Taylor case. The difference in ours that we did ours in the broad daylight. It was like, I guess in the afternoon, maybe between 2 and 6 o'clock. So it was daylight hours. We ended up having the girl that actually signed for the package. She confessed, and she actually called the person and told them that the package was there, and we ended up getting them that way. They came by to pick it up, and then we scooped them up. But with them, they didn't verify. I saw an update, and it said that they believed that she was there by herself, which was not good information because obviously because the boyfriend was there with her, and they was in bed asleep 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So, and they had picked up the guy that they was looking for. They had already got him. So there was no need to actually go to the warrant, serve the warrant in that nature at that time because he wasn't there.
How they not locked up by now, or at least something? I don't know. I don't see how that boils down to be a legitimate, honest mistake. That's negligence. That's what I call that. That's not a oops. That's just negligent.
Well, sometimes those guys they get caught up in the game. They get caught up in the stats. They get caught up in wanting to try to make a impressive catch and try to get a person who they know. A lot of times they get personal. They know the guy's dealing drugs. They know they're gonna put a dent in his network and everything. Take everything he got, even his dreams, and they don't consider the fallout. They're more focused on being judge, jury, and in this case executioner. That is following up. You're never gonna get all the drugs off the street.
Right.
Right. I used to tell guys all the time. That's why they call it the game. You keep playing long enough, you're gonna lose. And my part in the game was to catch them. Their part was to violate. My part was to catch it. I wasn't gonna catch all of them, but the ones I was gonna catch, I got them fair and square.
Well, I haven't been involved in many search warrants, but the ones that I have, I had a pretty technical supervisor, and he made sure that the pre-meeting took place where we went over everything. We had a property appraiser's map of the house. We had made sure that our informant gave us as much detailed information as to room location, possible occupants of the house. We made sure that, you know, we had assigned tasks. Every individual that was a part of the search warrant had assigned tasks. You know, he made sure that, you know, we had all the escape routes covered, K9. A lot of time we even had rescue on standby, you know, in the event that something went wrong. So he was pretty thorough, but he was a technical supervisor. So we made sure that minimal problems arose, that we tried to look outside the box for what if this happened and what if this happened, that we covered all bases. And that's the purpose of having a good pre-meeting prior to executing the search warrant.
Did y'all see what RV put?
No, I'm not looking at it, but
he has he says, in my experience, no-knock warrants were reserved for the most sophisticated and violent person or gang. It was designed to give the safety and advantage to the officers. If your information or intelligence is wrong, the cost of harm or death to the occupants are great, which is exactly what happened.
exactly. On the ones that I got, I believe, I think the majority of them all was served by SWAT. And that's the reason why I got the no-knock clause put in there, because it was to the level that it would have been a danger to our attack team with our equipment that we had.
Right.
These guys had cameras, surveillance cameras. We had intel that they had high-powered weapons. They had a propensity for violence. I did a background check on their criminal history and seen that they had been arrested for multiple ag assaults, and they had violent crime backgrounds, and they, you know, those are the ones that they served SWAT, because they were well prepared for the things of that nature. And like Sam, to go back to what Sam was saying, if you have a profession, if you're dealing yourself in professionalism at all times, then you're pretty much covered. You don't have those type of mistakes that you make. I've been in I can recall straight off the top of my head in 2 incidents where we had our professionalism show through, because we had discharges of firearms and it was controlled. The first one I say is
I think one of the ones I responded to where y'all shot a dog.
Yeah, that was the one that I was about to say. I had the shield that day, and the shield guy is the one who goes in front of the stack and makes first entry with the weapon on the side. Anyway, we got to the door. We had a breacher. He hit the door, and I swear the dog was like, it looked like Cujo. He stood up, and he looked like, Cujo or Mufasa. He was as tall as a man. And I shot, and the gunshot to my left, the person that was beside me, he shot. Dog was shot twice, once by me and once by the other officer. Nobody else shot. We made entry, and we took everybody into custody without any further violence or injury. The dog ended up having it. We called animal control. They ended up taking the dog, and he ended up, dying at the animal control. But no nobody else got shot, and nobody filled the residence with bullets. And that was weapons discipline, because the other people, the members of the team, they were right there. And they could have shot, but they, like I said, we had already designated shooters. Myself as a shell guy, and the other person that was going in, the breacher, the guy that was next to me. The other incident was that we served a search warrant. We went through the door. Our supervisor, he was in the backyard. Unbeknownst to us, when we hit the house, there was multiple people all over the house, and we heard gunshots from the rear of the house. And I remember grabbing one of the guys that I had put on the ground, and I pulled him up as a shield. But I didn't know if the shots were coming from in the house, but it come to find out, the supervisor got attacked by a pit bull in the backyard. And after he shot the pit bull, one of the other pit bulls started eating him. So they were both violent dogs. But in that instance too, the supervisor was the only person that shot. Nobody inside the house shot. Nobody else in the perimeter shot. So that's the the benefits of having professionalism and having, like Sam said, a pre-squad meeting.
RV posted something that's which I didn't notice, but he served a lot of that high level Fed stuff. But he posted what Sam is talking about is the ops plan on the federal level. If any time there is a deviation from the ops plan, then they scrap the execution.
Okay.
So I guess differently from feds than what we deal with on a local level.
Well, it's basically the same. We always had an ops plan too. We never just cowboyed up in the parking lot and said, let's go hit them.
But did you, like, if for whatever reason you had to deviate, would y'all? I'll give you a good example. And I don't even know how you deviate in the middle of this, but when I was on the task force, we were working with the Zone 6 task force, and we served a search warrant on a trailer somewhere way up in Zone 6. Well, the Ram guy was a guy on our squad because he was a big, strong dude, and he hit the door with the Ram, and the Ram went through the door. So it's like we didn't plan for that. So it's we still got to execute. We got to execute. But I'm wondering if like what RV said, if that's a scenario where everything gets scrapped because he hit the door with the Ram and the Ram went straight through the door.
Well, I think you're at the point of no return at that point. I think your pre-op plan doing the debriefing, if you get introduced more new information, or something just don't feel right, I think that it would be wise to say, listen, this is an arrest warrant or a search warrant. Time is on our side, and so we can always come back once we get everything in order that we need to have in order before going forward. But once you hit that door, I think you already have committed yourself. But doing the pre-op briefing, if something arises that was unexpected that you just can't overcome, or that puts officers in danger, or could hurt the going forth if it went to trial, loss of evidence or something getting thrown out, I think opportunity right there to scrap it and put it on hold.
I went through a situation, like you said, we hit the door. We had a big, strong guy. He hit the door, and the Ram went through the door. So he kept hitting it, and we toward the bottom and made a hole in it, and we just went into a hole in the door. Like Sam said, we were committed. Another thing, search warrants are very dangerous. You never know what to expect, especially like with drug search warrants. I remember I had one, and we made the mistake of executing it on Florida Georgia Day when they had the Florida Georgia game. From the road, it looked like it just looked like people's cars were parked. We didn't know, it was a row houses, so you didn't know who was where. Nobody was in the front yard when we went to the house. We hit the door. We had 2 people on the perimeter in the back. We hit simultaneously, and unbeknownst to us, they were having a party. So I swear it had to be maybe about 50 people inside. We had about 6 or 7 of us. So we called immediately. One of the officers called to send everybody, and we heard guns hitting the floor and people in the backyard dropping guns and stuff like that. Lucky for us, and God been watching out for foods and children. We've been foods that day. He definitely looked out for us because nobody got hurt.
Sam RV agreed with what you said. He said once the execution begins, you have to follow through with what you have. So that just back up what you said. My whole thing with this, as it relates to Breonna Taylor, is I don't, like I said, haven't done a few, not as many as Smokey and RV, but I've done a few, and we had some things that took place that we didn't account for, in which that happens. I just don't see how you end up in that scenario where you at a house which you really shouldn't even be at.
Yeah. Something failed in the op plan. Something failed drastically. You know, and I think I was reading another one of RB's comments and said that falls on the agency. You know,
right.
The burden of responsibility of the outcome is on the agency executing the warrant. And that comes back to that accountability and the leadership. You know, your leadership got to ensure that these things are followed properly. You know, dot your I's and cross your T's. And you can't have some leader out there, you know, playing cowboy because people's lives are at stake.
Yeah, you do have some, I mean, you do have some unscrupulous people, and both in the street in all professions. And you have, you know, there have been horror stories of officers, you know, being in the back door, you know, somebody, you know, doing a search warrant, you knocking, you know, you announce police, and you have an officer in the back say, come in, and they go in, and everybody in the house said, didn't nobody tell y'all, you know, nobody said that, and there being a person in the back, you know, in the backyard, and that comes to within the accountability thing and the professionalism. When I took that oath of being a police officer, I took that serious. I mean, a lot of the training I took upon myself to do on my personal time to make myself a professional, just like you would want your doctor to not just go to the scheduled training. You know, you want him to keep up with the latest and greatest in the medical field that's going on, because it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. So, I mean, a lot of things, and that's one of the things like the fleeing felon law. I mean, things like that, you know, it goes so far, then people make mistakes, and then those mistakes could have been avoidable mistakes. That's what makes case law.
Okay. Anything else that any one of you guys want to add to this part of the conversation before we move to the next topic?
Well, on the police, on the policeman's mindset, the people on the search team, on the team that's executing the search warrant, your adrenaline is very high. I mean, you like I say, auditory exclusion, and I mean, your adrenaline is up there. You never know what you're gonna go have inside, especially when you know that, say, we went to get homicide suspects, knowing that they were inside the house. You get in there, search everywhere, and they're nowhere to be found. We found people underneath the sink, folded up. We found people, you know, in the crawl space on the roof, going through the attic. I mean, these people could have killed us because they had to drop. They knew where we were. We didn't know where they were at. So it's a very highly charged operation. So you got to have your ducks in a row. And like RV was saying, all of that falls in the agency. That's why it's so important to know your agency's policy and procedures and to follow them to the T. Because if you don't, that's when they put you on the island by yourself and say, hey, he deviated from training, he deviated from policy. That's not on us, that's on him.
Yeah. And we're back to, if you go through your pre-op plan, everybody should know what their responsibilities are. You know, planning is everything. You know, and then you got to have someone that ensures that it's executed properly. So, I'm just high on leadership.
To me, it doesn't appear that the agency is holding them accountable at all right now, because at a minimum, you got a homicide investigation that should be taking place. somehow, some way. And
Well, it's kind of, I think it's a lot like remember buying, it's like buying clothes from Kmart. You know, I used to call it Kmart. Because if you have a thread on the shirt and you pull that thread, it starts unraveling other threads. Before you know, the sleeve comes off. So it may be a lot of things. Once they start pulling threads, it's going to be a lot of unraveling within that agency, and they're trying to minimize that.
yeah.
And that's just my theory, my opinion.
And you got the, you know, knowing here comes the backdrop for law enforcement when something goes wrong. One is it's a hard job. We're up under, you know, law enforcement is up under a lot of pressure. You know, the job itself is hard, and those are some of the collateral damage that took place. So they're going to probably put the emphasis on the fact that, hey, we went there in good faith. I mean, that's the big thing, and that's why you have, you know, the immunity clause for officers because of the good faith.
But they can't really use that because the person they was going to get was already in custody.
Well, see, now that's something you're right. They can't overcome, but I'm saying they're going to say, hey, listen, we made a mistake. You know,
That's negligent.
That's
negligent. That ain't no mistake. That's negligence.
I'm just trying to give a alternate opinion.
Negligent, and they behinds need to be arrested.
Yeah. Well, it's somebody's going to prevail. The family is going to prevail in the lawsuit at a minimum. At a minimum. But as far as an arrest being made, I doubt it. I doubt it.
You don't think so?
No.
I'm gonna say I'm on that.
Why? But why not though? Those are negligent acts. That's not a
But it wasn't intentional, and someone could have said, I checked to verify, and in between time, you know, he left, or my source told me this, but the information we didn't verify soon enough. So I don't think you can find intent and negligence versus we just didn't double check. You know, and there goes why you're going to get the civil lawsuit and win. But I don't think from a termination standpoint, I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I'm gonna use one of Denzel's quotes in Training Day. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Well, I need to be the prosecutor on that one. Ain't no way in the world you're gonna convince me that this is the kind of activity that really people anywhere, but the people of Louisville can expect from their law enforcement.
And that's one of the things in the that they're asking for in the law enforcement reform is to take away from some of that immunity, because law enforcement do have a lot of immunity because the trust that we're given. We're given that we're going to be professional. We're going to do the right thing. That our word is bond. And so that right there, they put that trust in us to say, we're going to give you the edge on that. Unfortunately, in today's law enforcement climate, that trust has been eroded. And that's why so many things are now coming into question. That's why we want so many officers and leaders held accountable, because the law enforcement as a whole is taking the heat for some officers who has violated that trust, and rightly so. If one officer violate that trust, then we all got to to denounce that and take some responsibility that, hey, if he did it, we're going to have to take some responsibility. And that may be taking a closer look at the way we do business, meaning putting stiffer discipline in place to avoid future officers doing the same things. And I don't think that had been happening, with the leaders making policy stronger and officers themselves standing on that thin blue line. That's what the public is up in arms about. And I know that kind of got the topic.
It's still on topic. The reason I'm up in arms is because I've gone in front of a prosecutor and a judge several times to have a search warrant signed that I can serve. And I know the detail that was required to put in that affidavit to get that judge to sign off on it. And so there's a whole lot of levels that you got to go through before you even get the paperwork to serve the doggone warrant. And then the execution of it, I don't know. I can't see where that particular deal took place. I mean, I can see where mistakes can happen, in anything, but I don't see actual mistakes in that Breonna Taylor warrant situation. I see negligence.
Well, one thing, LJ, is and speaking candidly, the uncomfortable truth, you have a lot of officers that have relationships that with the judge. They know, and a lot of them even brag, I can get anything signed by this judge so and so, because they got that relationship with them and they've had rapport with them, so they can get, they can get a search warrant for a glass of water, if they want to and they know it. So like Sam goes back to saying accountability. It has to be held to that higher standard. And with Sam's comments, his last comments, I think that'd be a great place to segue into the topic of Dorner.
Yeah. I'm gonna let y'all get a background. I'm just gonna say Chris Dorner was that dude. He was that dude.
Let me give my disclaimer first. I do not condone what Chris Dorner did in no way, shape, fashion, or form.
Right.
However, I do understand. So that's my disclaimer, because I know you're going to get a lot of very pro police that are going to say, well, he's talking against the very profession that he served. No, I'm not. I'm supporting the principles of the profession by saying he was wrong in all aspects, but his reasoning behind what drove him to that drastic action, the agency has to bear some responsibility. So, Smokey, do you want to give the backdrop on what happened and bring everybody up to speed?
Before he do that, I just want to throw in there, because this was always kind of like my thing from a supervisor perspective, dealing with subordinates. Everybody has a breaking point, and you don't know where that breaking point is with each individual you're dealing with. So you got to treat people right. Because you don't know where people's breaking point is, and nobody knew where his breaking point was. So go ahead, tell the story.
Now I'm gonna start mine off by echoing that I concur with Sam. In no way, shape, form, or fashion do I agree with Dorner's methods. What he did was appalling. It was disturbing, and it shouldn't have occurred. And I definitely would not have anything to do with anybody with that type of mindset or get that outcome that he did. And like you said, LJ, everybody has a breaking point. And then doing research of Chris Dorner, I learned that it started back when he was in school. His family moved to area. I believe they moved from either the Midwest or the East Coast to California. He was in a middle class family, well off school, and I believe he may have been the only black there in his class because he gives an instance that his I think what initiated his point, and this is in his words, when he was in elementary school, that was the first time he got called the word nigger. And he punched the kid who called him that. So they took him to the office, both parties involved. They swatted the kid who called him the name, and then they swatted him for his reaction. And I believe I can't remember if it was a Christian school or a Catholic school, but what they told him, the reason, and he questioned why they was punishing him for defending himself. And they told him what he should have did was turn the other cheek. And like the elder said, he wasn't that dude. He said from that moment forward, he was against racism and he would not stand for it. So fast forward, he ended up attending becoming a military officer. I think he was in the reserves. It was a rank of, I believe, lieutenant. And he went to college. He got a degree. Started with the LAPD. He was there for, I think it was 3 years. I think in the middle of his tour, the first and second year, he had to take a year off to go military obligations, and he came back. They put him on the harbor, he was in the harbor patrol. And then he went to another unit, I believe, to the street. And that's when he had during that time, he said that he had some racist incidents that happened to him. He reported them, nothing happened. The incident that kind of set things off was when his training officer, a female training officer, she kicked a handcuffed suspect. I believe he may have been mildly mentally off, but she kicked him 3 times. He said he kicked him in the chest and in the head. She kicked him in the chest and in the head. He reported it. Now, she was one of the officers that was friends with quite a few people in positions of power in the department. So his complaint went nowhere. So they end up filing charges on him, making him internal complaint that he filed a false report. He had a police captain to represent him on his hearing, and needless to say, he lost the hearing, in which he got fired. And at that point, he felt he had nothing to lose. So the first person he killed was the captain that represented him. He killed his daughter, and her fiance in the parking garage. They didn't see it coming, and that began his crime spree. He made a manifesto in which I vividly remember it being called that it was a rambling manifesto, and it was the ramblings of a madman. And they all harped on his training. Now, this man was in the military. This was post 9/11, so he had a top secret clearance. But to obtain that after 9/11, he would have to be, he had to go through some extensive mental training scrutiny. So, needless to say, everybody else that's what the story everybody knows about, the shooting, pulling up to a traffic light with 2 officers in a police car, and he just opened fire on them and then drove off like nothing happened. He was in his truck, drove away. 2 citizens witnessed it, and the manhunt was on. During the time that they was looking for Chris Dorner, he eluded them because he had extensive training. He was well armed, well trained, knew their tactics, and needless to say, they end up cornering him in I think it was Big Bear in California in the mountains. It was in the winter. I was in February, and they end up burning him out. Well, they didn't burn him out; they burned him up. Instead of the thing of waiting him out, they end up burning him out. Now, I made some postings on the Facebook page that shared his manifesto. And personally, I honestly, it didn't look, from seeing what we've seen in 2020, he was very articulate. And it wasn't that he had receipts. Like they would say nowadays, he had receipts. He named times, dates, places, people. And I tried to research the outcome of any internal investigation or federal investigation on his complaints, but I couldn't find any. But what I did find was during that time, the crime spree that Chris Dorner went on, the LAPD shot. They were protecting the high profile targets that he had named in his manifesto. So it was two ladies driving in I believe it was a truck or a van, and it was in the area of one of the people that they was protecting, and they lit the van up. They shot over 100 rounds into that van. Those ladies end up walking away with $4.2 million from the LA County. Another guy ended up getting shot during this encounter. During this time frame, they were looking for Chris. Didn't match the description of Chris, and just opened fire. They thought the truck matched the description. I couldn't find any disciplinary action on any of those officers that were involved in those incidents. These were clearly department violations, and at the time, the chief of police declared they were department of violations. So we have more questions than answers.
So here's my thing, because we get this question and we've seen it posted in the group and we've been asked on here, what prevents the quote unquote good officers from, when they see things happening, reporting what's going on to prevent stuff from taking place? So, and here's a situation where you had an officer, whether he was good or not, is prior to everything going off, I don't know, but he at least was reporting what he, saw was improper or inappropriate or police misconduct. And so he was doing exactly what people ask us about as far as police officers doing. He did that. On multiple occasions he did that. And he ended up being the bad guy for reporting police misconduct. So the black eye for me is, yeah, he was absolutely wrong for how he handled the situation on the back end of it. But as a law enforcement agency, as law enforcement officers, why was he made out to be the bad guy when he's pointing out police misconduct? We all should get pissed off when there's police misconduct. Everybody.
And after one of the LA officers, LAPD officers, he was a whistleblower also during the time that Dorner started his shooting. He made postings that, yeah, he understood how he felt because he was a whistleblower and he got the same negative results that Dorner did, but that's not the way to handle the situation as Dorner was doing it, which I agree with. It's not the way to do it. But he got to a point, like you said before, it's a breaking point. He snapped. He figured he had nothing to lose. He had his job. He lost his job. He lost his credibility. He felt that his integrity was impugned on, and he was a man determined.
Well, the reason that Chris Dorning story is circling back around, because it's starting to shed light that a lot of agencies has failed the men and women within the department that have tried to do the right thing, as well as has failed the community that it is tasked to serve. And they do so because they have the power of the pen and the resources to kind of cover their own. And most of the time, the people that they're covering for are people who is within their circle, or they're trying to prevent the blemish of the shield. So they protect that from the public, so the public can continue to think that we are stellar in all accounts, and we're not, you know. And so they're the one that failed us. And when I look at this Chris Doering situation, he did the right thing, but it was that thin blue line that the administration stood on, is that, hey, that officer that you said went overboard in the way she treated a suspect, that's just part of the job, you know? And sometimes you have to be heavy-handed in order to accomplish the mission. That's the way a lot of them think. So they think that you're going against someone who had to physically take aggressive action. And so they felt like that should have been handled between those two officers, or just handled internally, versus making a huge complaint out of it, which probably would have went public and put that blemish on the officer, because they were already up under a lot of scrutiny as an agency, you know, going all the way back to the Rodney King incident. So they've always been in the spotlight. So I'm assuming LAPD do everything they can to minimize all ill repute of their department.
Yeah, it also happened after the Rampart incident in LA, in which they had the elite unit that just went rogue and was doing more crimes than the criminals.
Right.
So, and another thing that I found out in research, and they said that many of the people that sat on Chris Dorner's disciplinary board, the hearing, they were friends with the officer that he complained against. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of up against a stacked deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Sam.
Okay.
I was just going to say, when you have a situation like that, because that was LAPD, but I don't believe, actually I know that's not restricted. That kind of behavior from a department isn't restricted to LAPD. And that's what ticks me off, because as a civilian, as a retired police officer, just as a human being, because a part of what you do as a law enforcement officer is supposed to be upholding right. And when you have somebody that goes overboard and somebody reports that, saying, hey, this person went overboard, that person should not end up being the bad guy. Even when this was going on then, and even with us talking about it now, that just really, really overcooks my grits. That bothers me big time.
And that's the thing that bothers me, is how they villainized him. And I understand, because anytime you have someone that you feel is your opposition, and you know you have to gain support from the outsiders, the people that's going to be looking at, you know, the outcome of what's going on, you got to make the other guy look like the villain. So you got to paint him in a bad light, and you dig up any dirt you can. I mean, we can see this now in every aspect of our society. You know, when you pit one against the other, you got to make the other guy look like he is the absolute worst. So that was one of the things that drove him to that point, was he felt like he was a man of integrity. He felt like he stood on principle all his life, you know. And when you feel that strong about your personal integrity, and someone has just trampled on it, I mean, it's enough to push you over the edge. And so, you know, they tried to make him feel like he was narcissistic. He was a dud recruit and just barely made it through, and you know that he was clumsy, and they tried to just make him look like he was the absolute worst, and he shouldn't have made it through training. Then during the incident, you know, the first thing you got to paint a person with is, well, they're suffering from mental illness. Sometimes a person say, listen, I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. I'm doing it because this is what I chose to make my point. So I don't think he suffered from mental illness. If you read his manifesto, it was very articulate. It was not some ramblings of a madman. He had dates, times, names, incident. He supported everything that he said with a lot of facts, a lot of well thought out opinions. So I don't think he suffered from mental illness. I think he was well aware of what he was doing, and he had made peace with his maker. And his whole point was, I'm going to make you think about what you did. And I don't know if many people saw the movie Law Abiding Citizen. And it kind of made that same point as to this guy felt like the system was not fair to him. And he went on vengeance against the system. And he said, y'all still don't get it. One of my best movies. And he said, y'all still don't get it. And I'm going to bring this whole corrupt system to his knees. And even at the end, when he was ultimately killed, he sat there calmly and said, I'm at peace with what I did. You know, so it wasn't, I don't buy into the notion that when someone do something so heinous that they automatically are labeled with a mental illness problem. You know, we've all thought about it. We've all thought about doing some heinous things, but you know, we didn't. We felt like, hey, you know, it's too much. For whatever reason, we didn't. You know, but I'm probably inches or just you know, I mean, I'm probably just inches from being that man too in a lot of situations. But my character wouldn't let me go there. But nobody knows my breaking point. You know, to your point, Law, nobody knows your breaking point. And so I haven't reached mine, but I've gotten real close. And by no means was I not aware of what the consequences of my actions would be. But
and that's one of the things that made me, I remember at the time doing the incident, I was following it, and then the outcome, because I remember a couple of days beforehand, they said that she tried to carjack take a boat. You know, like I said, he was assigned to the harbor police, and he was in a Navy officer, so he knew the waterways. But then they said they found his ID and his wallet at that scene. Then fast forward to when they burned him out, when they burned him up in the cabin, which is another thing that, he's in the cabin, he's trapped, he's alone. Why not wait him out? I mean, what's the, and then with the radio traffic, and I put those on the post also in the comment section, about them pre-planning to use burners. Now, anybody with common sense know that if you throw something that's flammable into a wood structure, it's highly likely that thing's gonna catch on fire. So,
but did he commit suicide? He committed suicide
after it started burning.
Man, listen, it don't matter. He was not being taken alive, so
yeah, he wasn't gonna leave out that burning. I mean, he'd rather take a bullet than to burn up. I mean, I think I would do the same thing. If I was trapped and couldn't get out and I had a gun nearby and I knew this was it, I don't think I'm gonna get burned to death. I'm gonna go quick and painless.
Well, here's the thing for the people that ask that question all the time. There are officers that do not have a problem reporting police misconduct. It's just the conduct of the police profession is so poison that person ends up being the bad guy when you report information on somebody that's actually doing bad. And I just, like I said before, that burns me up.
Yeah, I've done it myself. I've reported people for doing stuff that they shouldn't have done, and I let them know. I'm not going to court. I'm not going to be a defendant, a co-defendant with you. So I did what I was supposed to do. I reported. It was wrong, but then they end up getting a slap on the wrist, or I get told by the supervisor, "Oh, I'm gonna talk to them," and they back to doing what they're doing. It's like nothing ever happened. Like I never said anything, but that still didn't stop me from doing what I was supposed to do. I
Right.
reported each and every time, and I let them know, look, you can like me, love me, whatever. I don't care. I got this job to make money, not friends. If I got friends along the way, that's cool. It's icing on the cake.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But and I think Law brought it up before. You know, I've been in a situation that I had a restraining order on somebody, and then I get called down to internal affairs, and this is for violating a restraining order that I had against this person, and I'm shown photographs in my patrol car from behind with this person that's taken to internal. So I asked the investigator, I said, well, how is this photograph taken behind me if I'm violating the, they're following me, so I'm not in violation of the injunction. They are. They told my response, the response to me was that I'm doing this investigation, you're not. I'm the one asking questions, you're not. So, I want to try to be a smart ass. I'm just common sense. It's like, how can I violate something if I'm in front and you behind me? Who's
Right.
following who?
Right.
Who's in violation?
Who doing the stalking?
Exactly. But because I wasn't, one of the chosen ones, or I was on that list, I was one of them guys, they, every little thing, they bring it up. And I welcome it. People would, they say that they're going to make internal complaints on me. I tell them exactly the procedure. I give them a name, ID number, tell them where to go, what the office number, be open between Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
One of these days we got to get
just like
RV
now,
on here because he just like you, he done been in the fire with some of the most sensitive things that go on in our former agency. So he know where the bodies are buried too. So I would sure like to hear his perspective on some of this stuff. We got to get RV on here because he know where the bodies are. He probably can go dig up a few right now. I shouldn't say that. They might be trying to hunt my man down. Stay safe, RV. Don't let them get you.
But I think, like Sam was saying, it falls on the accountability, and it starts at the top. It starts at the top, and actually, it's not actually the sheriff, because the sheriff is just a figurehead. The undersheriff is the one who actually gets the day-to-day nuts and bolts and gets the information, and he passes on what he feels that the sheriff should know or how he should know it. So the information may be manipulated. The sheriff may not be aware of stuff.
That's a piss poor business model because that don't work. If I'm the elected sheriff, then I need to be the one to ensure that the things that I think and feel are, is properly disseminated to the people that's got to do the job. I don't subscribe to the theory that the sheriff sit on the third floor and delegate everything. It's a part of that, but then at some point you got to be. This is a philosophy that I have. A good shepherd should smell like sheep. So that's just how I feel about that.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why when I was on one of the investigators on the corruption case I worked on, my immediate supervisor was Nat Glover, the sheriff. So that tells you just, he knew the ins and outs of the thing. He knew what time it was. So he cut out all the middlemen, he cut out all the interference, and I had leave slips signed by the sheriff. So that there was nobody could hold anything over my head or try to have some type of undue influence.
I mean, that's just, to me, that's just the way it should be. A good shepherd. If you met somebody and they told you they was a shepherd and they don't smell like sheep, then you wonder what kind of shepherd they were. A good shepherd should smell like the sheep that they shepherding. That's
Another thing,
that's a LJism. I don't, ain't no. That's
another
just
thing,
how I feel.
and being straight up, and I know you guys have heard it all the time. It's us against them, and that mentality. I always say, words matter. When you start calling people thugs and lowlifes and dirtbags, and you develop a mindset that that's what they are in your mentally, so you can treat them. You don't see them as a human, so you talk that gives you propensity to talk to them any kind of way, and treat them any kind of way. So that's what a lot of the complaints are. And then I recall on many occasions when officers would say, yeah, they, say the word they or them over there, and that I say, look, when I take this uniform off, I'm one of them too.
Right.
And it kind of gave them, the eyes buck and, to get quiet, but that's just the truth. And like I said, I'm stand on it.
I'm gonna throw this question out. It says, when something goes wrong, why isn't there an outside agency or organization doing the investigation? I personally think that would be a huge dent in misconduct. Well, I remember, I think when Ken Jefferson was running for sheriff, he mentioned that FDLE would do the investigation on police shootings, and he caught all kind of flack for that. But I agree, and I'm gonna tell you why I agree. When I was living in St. Johns County, they shot a few people when I was living there. You heard about it on the news when it happened, and you didn't hear about it anymore because the FDLE did their investigation. Now, that's a smaller agency, but it was never a question about bias in the investigation because it was an outside entity that did the investigation. And you heard when it happened, and you didn't hear about it no more. Even up here, when the GBI do stuff, they do their investigation, and it's either good or it ain't. I mean, it's not home cooking, so to speak.
Any agency that is truly, truly sincere about transparency, they want another set of eyes on their investigation. If they just utterly refuse, they got to be hiding something, So I'm in favor of a citizen review board, and I know a lot of the officers are going to say, well, I don't want nobody judging me who have never walked in my shoes. And the only thing that I can say to that is, we go seek medical treatment from doctors, that has never had our ailment, but we trust them. People can bring in a different perspective, which only adds to the bigger picture. So yeah, bring in some civilians, that are rational people, and let them look it over. Someone may have a background in psychology, that can understand human behavior, or maybe an educator, or may have a background in biology, or, whatever. But everybody can bring a different perspective to any situation. So I'm in favor of a citizen review board. You just got to get good people that just have good moral integrity, and it's going to be fair. And if they're going to be fair, they're going to take the time to understand the entire process and apply the logic towards, the best resolution. So I'm in favor.
I'm gonna have my apprehension with that. I'm cool with it. It's just my thing would be you have to attend some kind of citizens police academy or some kind of citizen academy, something. So at least you have an idea of what happens or when decisions are made, how they're made. I don't believe that's the group that should be determining if somebody did something wrong or not.
So let me ask you this. Ultimately, in all legal issues, the the Supreme Court reigns supreme.
Right.
Most Supreme Court judges never went through a citizen academy. Most Supreme Court judges never wrote a beat, you know, but they rule in favor of what's best for our society every day, and their opinion becomes the law of the land. So that's just one example. Is you don't have to have walked in my shoes as a law enforcement officer to say, well, let me just look at the facts and apply some rationale as it pertains to our founding principles, which is the Constitution, you know, which is, you know, comes down to our laws and our policies. You know, people can apply logic, and if they look at the bigger picture and the evidence, you know, I don't have to be an evidence technician to review the evidence. I ain't have to be the one to collect it.
Let me give you an example, because this is actually something we talked about on here. We all said we wouldn't have done it, but it happened, and it probably is going to be upheld. But the officer that shot the brother in the back in Atlanta, without having personal understanding of what it means when you're chasing behind somebody and they turn and point a taser at you, without having an understanding of what that means, most people won't get why that shot was fired or why those shots were fired.
But before they make a decision, if you're going to be on a citizen review board, you got to know all what are the parameters, and that's why if they brief the jury when there's a trial, they brief the jury as these are the parameters that you have to make your decision. You know, so they tell them, here's the law, here's what you can and cannot consider. So even in that case, before someone just says, hey, that was right or wrong, they want to tell them, these are some of the factors that you must consider or that you cannot consider before making your decision. They don't just ask them to come in there blind and make decisions. So they're going to tell them, this is what the law says. This is what our policy is. This is what our training is. And so when they take that all into account and say, now here's what happened. You apply all these things that we was working within, and you tell me if I stayed within the boundaries or if I went outside of the boundaries. You know, so the biggest thing that our counterparts are going to say it was a good shooting is the fact that he turned, and we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes, the fact that he turned around with that taser and pointed it at the officer. Okay, but if I'm going to apply the law, could that taser have what did it cause him imminent danger? That taser now, because that's what he fired him on, justified the use of him using deadly force. That taser, at the distance that he was, if that taser had been deployed, the stinger part of it had been deployed, it wasn't going to reach that officer. And there was too much distance in between for him to use it as far as a dry fire. Plus, at that moment, when the guy turned around, the officer was running up on the tail end, the back end of a vehicle that he ducked behind to use as cover. So, and I keep going back to, I needed to know whether Georgia had the flee and felon law. You know, so with all those things coming into account,
yeah, I think Smoker had already said they didn't have that.
They don't have a flee and felon. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but you know, Citizen Review Board, they're going to know how to, you know, decipher all the evidence and all the information, and they're going to understand our policies and the laws and our training, and they're going to take all this information, and I think they're going to be rational in their decision. You know, I mean, it ain't like they're bringing some Joe Schmo off the street, I would imagine.
I agree they'll be rational. And I think, you know, it should be a part of it. I just don't know if I'm willing to I would rather have an investigative agency do the investigation to determine if, you know, criminal charges or whatever are going to be filed. But a citizens review board going through it, maybe that's the group that go through it to look at it and see if that officer's supposed to be disciplined or fired or something. I don't know.
Now, help me to understand, because I think this is where it hasn't been decided, but I'm sure this is the way it's going to go. You're going to have your internal investigation, and then you're going to have your citizen review board to also look over the facts. And then the two bodies would come together and say, well, do we agree? And where we don't agree, we got to have a meeting of the mind until we come to one general consensus. So that way, you're not just relying on the perspective of law enforcement and their internal investigation, which there was no oversight, nor are you relying on the, like you say, the lack of insight of a citizen review board. You're not just relying on theirs, you know, so you bring the two together for them to say, well, we need to come to one general consensus. And I would even hope that there would be three bodies, you know, that would be into it, because someone could be the tiebreaker, or where it leans towards one side, they can bring the outsider to their side if their case is strong enough.
But that's what I'm saying. The investigative body, so let's just say FDLE investigates whether or not the shooting was unlawful. Mm-hmm. And then the agency or civilian review board may investigate if the incident was within the policy.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, one of the problems I have with it, and speaking candidly, and you guys may have heard it also, there's a lot of officers that tell junior officers, and even, you know, a lot of the senior officers, they come with the consensus of don't cooperate with GBI. I've heard that being said, and I'm correct. I was like, well, if you ain't got nothing to hide, why would you not cooperate? So that's, if they're not going to cooperate with an investigative law enforcement agency, what makes you think they're going to cooperate with a citizen review?
Well, again, if you're telling officers not to cooperate, then that means that something is wrong with your integrity system.
Now we back to the Chris Dorner situation all over again.
So, and again, it starts at the top. It's you got to have the management, admin. Everybody has to be on the same page. And they have to know that the lower end, everybody has to know that there's going to be consequences, repercussions.
Man, do what's right, and then you ain't got to worry about all this stuff. Just do what's right.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake.
Yeah, but we can live with mistakes, but I can't support negligence, and I can't support just straight up willful acts of wrongdoing. I can't rock with that. Because in the law enforcement profession, you don't get the opportunity to just be negligent. You don't get that. And you also don't get the opportunity to just do wrong. Because we get to go in and tell a judge that I observed this person doing 65 and a 35, and that's credible when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we continue down the path that law enforcement is going down, that won't be credible no more. Now you're gonna have to start proof. You got to prove with video.
Yeah. Well, looking at the clock on the wall says that's all.
It's about that time. Before we go, I want to throw this out there. It's a little bit, it's a lot of bit off subject, but it's important to say. When it's time to vote, don't vote on election day. Vote early. Vote early, vote early, vote early. You're less likely to encounter voter suppression if you vote early. That's just my PSA.
I support that one. No matter what. Vote early. Vote. I mean, get your friends, get your family, drag someone off the street. You know, the power is in the vote. You know, the reoccurring theme that we're all having is leadership. You know, ineffective leadership is what's hurting our society at this point. And it's people that we voted in and we voted them in because we did not vet them, you know, or we played sides trying to be loyal to a person or a party. I don't care who it is. I mean, if Donald Trump was a Democrat, I still say he got to go. If Joe Biden was a Republican, I would still cast my vote for him under this situation. And I'm hearing too many voters say, I don't like either one of them. You know, and I hear that, but you still got to choose one. You still got to choose one. So I ain't telling you who to vote for, but if we gonna choose the lesser of two evils, you know, let your conscience be your guide. But go ahead, but vote. I guess that's my point.
I agree with everything both of you guys just said. And to not vote is also voting because it's complicit. I mean, you're not participating. So that one vote could be the deciding factor. Now, if it's 1,000, 10,000 people that feel the same mindset as you that don't vote, that's 10,000 votes that didn't get cast.
Yeah. And don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the numbers of who's leading in the polls and who's behind. Don't get caught up and say, oh, that's a waste of time because this person is already in the, you know, is looked at as the winner, or this person is looked at as the loser. Don't fall for that. Go out and vote and wait until the last vote is cast before you decide that it has already been decided. So don't fall for the okie doke.
Yeah, run the score up. Run the score up.
You want to announce about Monday, Sam?
Yes. We have decided to take our live stream from Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Central Time to Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Central Time, the 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. So we'll be back on this upcoming Monday, so it's going to be a short turnaround for us, but tune in Mondays. And I know it's at the end of the show where we should have probably talked about it at the beginning, but hopefully we had enough interest that everybody hung in there till the end to get this bit of information. So Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific.
Please hit the like button. Hit the like button so we know you're there. We ain't talking to each other. I know you're out there. I see you looking, but you ain't liking.
Also, what's the YouTube channel?
Retired Voices of Reason. So we do have a YouTube channel that we will be uploading video content in the future. We also have a email address that you can email us at retiredvoicesofreason@gmail.com if you wanted to send us an attachment or any type of correspondence. So we're trying to, you know, put everything in order as far as branding and being accessible. It's taken us some time. You know, we've experienced some technical difficulty. We're not professional journalists. You know, we're just a group of guys that's trying to do something positive, but we're going to eventually get it right and make it better. But we do need your support just from the standpoint of commenting and viewing.
And asking questions.
And thank you guys for participating on our page and asking questions and making comments. I mean, that's the stuff we're looking at. That's the stuff we like. I mean, you got a lot of people thinking the same thing you're thinking, but unless it's asked, we can't answer. We can't give our opinion. We can't give our take. And you know, if it's some information that we can look up that's factual, we're gonna do the research. We're gonna do the work, do the research.
Yeah. So I'm gonna close with, we may not always be right, but we always gonna be real.
Peace.
Peace.
Are we off?
It appears.
Yeah, we off. Okay, cool.
You
right.
still recording on the back end though.
I just